A confirmation regarding the audio, please, guys. If you're able to hear me out perfectly well, please confirm the same. Thank you very much. So, hello, a very warm good evening to all of you, and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep. Welcome to today's webinar, where today we shall be discussing few of the important topics which are relevant for your mains-based current affairs for GS Paper 3. That is the portion of environment and ecology, as well as for the portion of science and tech. So in this webinar, we shall be holding a discussion for 6 topics, and those topics we shall be discussing in elaborate length and elaborate detail, where we shall try to get to the depth and to the bottom of it. We shall try to understand the basics. Many of us present here, we don't know the basics with regards to the various different, for example, climatic commitments that India has. So in all those topics, we shall try to get to the very base. Now, amongst those 6 topics, we shall also be covering 2 topics which have appeared in the magazine of Kurukshetra. Kurukshetra. So 2 articles from Kurukshetra, that is again something that we shall be covering. Overall, if those of us who are not aware that what these articles are or whether Kurukshetra is relevant or not, I hope that we have this much information that Yojana and Kurukshetra forms an important bulwark for our preparation. And that is where in all of these subsequent webinars and in all the various webinars, from one portion or the other, we shall be covering Yojana and Kurukshetra as well, so that for you as a candidate, for you as an aspirant, you don't have to refer to these magazines separately. Just the attending or the attention in these webinars and the revision from these webinars shall be more than sufficient for all of you. Having said that, and before looking at the topics that we are going to discuss today, a brief announcement with regards to the prelims test series for all of you who are appearing for the examination this year, or even those of you who are appearing for the examination next year. The best way to analyze your level of preparation is by appearing for these tests, the practice tests. So do appear for these practice tests, and rather than taking a note of how much we are able to score in these tests, what your approach as a candidate should be, that how your mind or brain is functioning for those 2 hours for which you are attempting the test, right? So that should be the prime focus. How much you are able to attempt in an easy manner, how much of those questions are you facing difficulty in. If you are getting a new piece of information, add it to that, so that by the time that you are appearing for the prelims exam, you are well prepared. Okay, now having said that, now we take a look at the topics that we are going to hold for the discussion today. So as you can see, first of all, we shall be discussing the 2 articles which have appeared in the portion of Yojana, that is mitigating environmental issues, which has appeared in Kurukshetra, and India, a green hydrogen global hub. So green hydrogen, from all the various avenues, you would be listening and hearing about green hydrogen, and you would be aware that how important this is for the next 2 to 3 years of the examination. You will find significantly questions appearing from this area, be it the prelims or the mains examination. So what is green hydrogen? How is it that India can develop itself into a kind of a global hub for green hydrogen manufacturing? That is something we are going to take a look into. Then development of defense export ecosystem. Now, India as an armed force generally has always imported equipment from abroad. In this article, we shall be taking a look into how the entire ecosystem is slowly and steadily morphing its entire identity into an export-based system, where now we are exporting our defense equipments to various other member nations as well. So with the help of graphs, with the help of data and map, we shall be analyzing where is it that India is exporting, how can India export more, what are the hindrances which are prevalent. Then after that, global sea level rise, the state of global climate report, which has been given by World Meteorological Organization, WMO, that has released this particular report. So again, that is something that we are going to put some attention on. Then being Atmanirbhar in climate finance. Being Atmanirbhar in climate finance means finding new methodologies to fund the mechanisms which help you adapt to the climate change. So, what is climate finance? What is being Atmanirbhar in climate finance? This is a very important topic again for your mains. And then eventually, again, we will be talking about a report which talks about reducing the usage of plastic and how do we reduce that? What should be the direction that the policy measures they should follow? So overall, these are the various different 6 topics that we are going to hold for discussion. The session, for those uninitiated, let me tell you, the session will continue till 10:30. In the meanwhile, wherever you find any questions or any issues which you are not comfortable with, feel free to ask questions. The subject matter experts will be at their level best trying to answer your questions almost immediately. In case is certain delay, please don't get hassled by it. Majority of the questions I shall be taking up at the end of the session. Once we have held a discussion for all these topics, once I have given you the idea what these topics are about, that is when I shall also be taking some of the questions at the end. Okay. So having said that, let us initiate the discussion for the first topic directly, and that is mitigating environmental issues. Now, this is an article which has appeared in Kurukshetra for the month of January 2023. This is an article which has appeared. Now, before going into the depth of it, let us understand what does the heading tell us. Okay, and that is the approach that I would suggest all of you to follow as well in your preparation. Before straight away jumping into the depth of a topic, first of all, try to figure out what the topic in itself tries to convey to you. In many of the times, that creates a preliminary understanding, so your overall understanding of a topic gets cemented further if you analyze it like this. So mitigating environmental issues, in simple terms, it talks about taking care of the environmental issues that we face, that we come across. So, what are the environmental issues that we come across? So, we do come across a lot of environmental issues, from the aspect of air pollution to global warming to greenhouse gases. There are a lot of environmental issues which we face. So, how do we prevent that? How do we stop that? How do we make the environment more conducive to live upon? That is the topic of the day. So here, when we initiate it, when we initiate the discussion, first of all, the context is something that you have to be mindful about. So we have to understand that greenhouse gases, they are generated almost on a daily basis. And when we say greenhouse gases, which gases are we referring to? So in majority, we are referring to carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, even water vapor. Water vapor is also a significant greenhouse gas. Then you have methane, then you have nitrous oxides, then you have sulfur dioxide as well. Right? So basically, these are the greenhouse gases. They are emitted both from human based sources as well as when we consider natural sources. For example, in any region, suppose, and right now we are suffering from very high temperatures and we are experiencing very high temperatures across the country, the length and the breadth of the country. So, after a prolonged season of heat, sometimes you experience that certain forests, they catch fire, be it in Australia, even in India, be it in Uttarakhand, be it in Sikkim, be it in Tamil Nadu. You do have these forest fires which happen. And when the forests they start burning on their own, then what happens? They will also release carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, methane, SO2, everything. So again, suppose when there is a volcanic eruption, even when there is a volcanic eruption, you would observe a lot of gases being released into the atmosphere. What are those? Water vapor, carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, sulfur dioxide. So, natural factors as well as human caused factors, both of them are responsible for the release of these greenhouse gases. Now, the greenhouse gases, they have always been present in the atmosphere for some amount and some degree. It is only since the, and it has only been since the Industrial Revolution, the era of industrialization when it began. At that point of time, we humans, we started burning all the fossil fuels, including coal, petroleum, everything, natural gas, and so on. All our industries, they started burning all these materials in significant quantity. And as a direct consequence and as a direct result of that, we had a scenario whereby after the industrial revolution, you had significant addition of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And this has been a continued process. This is something which is continuing even today. Even today, we are emitting a lot of these gases into the atmosphere almost endlessly. So that is where all the abundance of these greenhouse gases, that is leading to the warming of the planet Earth. It is warming at a rate which is simply put unprecedented. It is warming at a rate of 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius as compared to what was experienced maybe 300 years ago. Now, this is what we refer to as global warming. Now, this global warming has its varied impacts. And the impacts can be, for example, melting of ice and snow in the polar areas and mountainous regions. It can also be greater amount of sea level rise experienced across the world. So there are varied impacts due to this global warming. What is it that we are doing? What is it that we can do? That is where the topic comes into the play: mitigating environmental issues. Now, over 80% of India's energy needs, they are met by three base fuel sources, that is coal, oil, and solid biomass. Right? They basically represent majority of India's needs for energy. And as per the World Energy Outlook, which is released by which agency? International Energy Agency. This is relevant for your prelims examination. That which organization releases the report World Energy Outlook. So these are few of the things that you should ideally compile in an A4 sheet paper, where on one side you are writing the reports and on the other side the organizations which releases those reports. So as per the World Energy Outlook represented by or released by International Energy Agency, the current share of India in global primary energy consumption is around 6%. Now, even though right now you might think 6% is not significant, but this is something which is going to increase. As our population is increasing, our demands are also going to increase when it comes to energy. And with the growth in economy which is happening in the country across the entire spectrum, you will observe that the country's economy is growing. That is something which will also add up significant amount of energy requirement. So this is all set to increase. So it is high time that Indian government should take certain measures in order to prevent the same, in order to ensure that India is no longer contributing to the pollution of the world. Now, if the subsidies oftentimes which are provided with these fossil fuels, for example oil, for example coal, many of the times the government provides them at a subsidized rate. And overall also across the country, if you hold a discussion that should petrol and diesel be provided at a subsidized rate, almost everyone will say yes, it should be provided at a subsidized rate. Why? We don't want to pay significantly for petrol, diesel, etc. But we want to continue to consume it. We want to continue to burn it. So as long as we are burning it at a subsidized rate, in a way, we can also say that the government is partially paying for the pollution which is happening in the country. Because when we talk about subsidy, what does subsidy tell us? Subsidy is basically any good or material which is provided at a cheaper rate. Some part of the price is taken care by the government. So if you are burning petrol and diesel at a cheaper rate, means government is bearing the rest of the cost. Now, if government is bearing the cost for the consumption of fossil fuels, then that can never lead to a cleaner environment, can it? So all the money that is diverted to make petroleum, oil, coal, etc., at a cheaper rate, that can be utilized for newer technologies, for better methodologies. And it is not as if the government has not come up with a kind of a corrective step or a corrective measure. The government has done that. And here you find listed the various different measures or steps taken by the government. Now, right now, this might seem to be a very theoretical or a theory heavy slide, text heavy slide in general. But why I have included all this theory is so that if a question comes that discuss or describe the steps taken by the government to mitigate the environmental challenges, you should have the ability to write the important pointers which we have discussed. Okay. Now, here, first, for example, national policies on climate change, if you will observe, it was in 2008 when National Action Plan on Climate Change, NAPCC, that was prepared, and under which you had 8 submissions: Green India, Sustainable Agriculture, protection of the Himalayan ecosystem. So you had various different submissions under the National Plan for Climate Change. So all these, they were aimed at basically making the entire ecosystem in the country a much better place to live in. So all these 8 submissions, be it the aspect of establishing a more green building, better green building where you don't need the adequate amount of air conditioners, where you don't need artificial lights, etc., all of that, at their level, they play a significant role in combating the environmental issues that we face. Other than that, you also have a long-term low-carbon developmental strategy, which India has submitted to United Nations Framework Convention to Climate Change to focus on the rational utilization of the carbon energy that you have. By the way, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, when was it signed? Let me see if we are aware about it. When was this signed? UNFCCC. Very good. Manisha, Pawan, Jinal, Akash. Very good. So this is something which was signed in 1992. And where was it signed? In which place? It was signed in Rio de Janeiro. Where is this? This is in Brazil. Okay. These tidbits you have to hook onto and you have to revise as you move ahead. This will further strengthen your understanding and make you better prepared for prelims. So there, India has already submitted for this convention a kind of its low carbon strategy. Then the climate change action plan was launched during the 15th plan period. Now this 15th 5-year plan period, when we talk about, this basically is which duration? 2012 to 2017. Okay. So, in the duration between 2012 to 2017, India had its own climate change action plan with an outlay of close to around 300 crore. Why? To build the capacity and support the implementation of various initiatives which need to be taken in order to mitigate the impact made by climate change. Then you also had the adaptation, or in fact the establishment of National Adaptation Fund for Climate Change, that was established in 2015. It was at this point of time when the entire world was discussing and debating about the fine prints and the fine points to be presented in the Paris Agreement. So the entire world was focusing upon the Paris Agreement. It was at that point of time when India wanted to show to the world that yes, we indeed are also serious. Because please understand, for us Indians, it has become, or the entire scenario has completely reversed itself. If you take a look back at our history, if you take a look at our cultural traditions, all the cultural traditions that we have from various parts of the country, all of them naturally, they talk about being one with the nature, regardless of from whichever part of the country that you belong from. If you observe your own local traditional customs which are followed, in almost all of them, you will find that there is some or the other way by which you worship the nature. So traditionally, we have always been a civilization which has held nature at a significant amount of prestige. But then, for the last couple of decades, India has somehow taken the prominence in the entire world that we are the polluters of the world. And why is that? That is because our cities are polluted. Had the cities not been polluted, such image of India would never have been portrayed to the world. So that is where we need to take care of our own pollution, of our own issues as well. And by doing that, we can very well significantly solve the problems faced by the world. It is because of this background that when India went to Glasgow in December 2021, in order to attend the 26th Conference of Parties, which was held at Glasgow, India declared its Panchamrit intention. And that Panchamrit declaration of India, that was made where? At Conference of Parties 26, number 26 of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, that was held in Glasgow. When? This was held in 2021. Right? So there, if you take a look at the Panchamrit declaration that India made, it was basically about how India will, in a way, adapt itself. It will change the procedures that it has been following. It will go for a greener economy, more eco-friendly economy. So here, India will get its non-fossil energy capacity to 500 gigawatts by 2030. 50% of the energy demands or the energy requirements from renewable energy by 2030. Imagine 50% of our energy requirements that will be fulfilled by renewables. Then India will reduce the total projected carbon emissions by 1 billion tons by 2030. These are significant commitments to make, monumental commitments to make. By 2030, India will reduce the carbon intensity of its economy by less than 45%. And by the year 2070, India will achieve net zero. What is this net zero? Net zero is a situation or a scenario where whatever amount of carbon that you are emitting in the atmosphere, by some or the other measures, you are absorbing or taking in that amount of carbon back. How? So, for example, when we have trees, for example, let's say we have the presence of trees here. Now, trees, they take in carbon dioxide and they give out what? They give out oxygen. So naturally, they are storing this carbon dioxide. So net zero is a situation where whatever carbon or carbon compounds that you release, in some or the other manner, it is absorbed by systems present in your country itself. So in a way, you are not adding any newer amount of carbon dioxide into the global atmosphere as compared to what was there before. So India has set itself a goal of 2070 to be able to achieve that, even though for all practical purposes, this is a goal which will be achieved much, much earlier. Then, when we talk about pollution, here you have to understand another aspect, and please pay attention here. We might think that pollution is caused by vehicles moving from one place to another, construction materials, dust, industries polluting, etc. While that is a major cause of pollution, but what we end up ignoring is that the agricultural sector, which involves close to more than 50% of our population, that is indulged or involved directly and indirectly in the agricultural system. Now, that agricultural setup or that agricultural system, there also you have the operation of tube wells, pumps. Now, what do the pumps do? They extract water from underground level and they spread it out or irrigate the fields. Now, all these pumps, they are operated based upon diesel as a fuel. Now, there also, if ever you have been to a farmland and you have seen these tube wells running, you would observe that how a kind of a black smoke is given out by these pumps. So that is a major source of emission in agricultural sector. So that is why the government has initiated a program in order to carry out the solarization of these pumps and this generation. And that is what is also referred to as the PM Kusum Yojana. Now, that PM Kusum Yojana is being implemented by MNRE, or Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. Even in the last month's webinar, I had talked in detail and discussed in detail about the PM Kusum Yojana, how it has been extended, what are the benefits of it. But still, those of you who have not understood, or those of you who are not aware about it, please understand. The aim of the Kusum Yojana is very simple. You reduce the emissions by what? By ensuring that you have the presence of solar panels on these pumps, so that they are not dependent on diesel energy anymore. So they become eco-friendly. At the same time, you provide solar power to all these pumps if possible, so that at the generation point as well, you are ensuring there is not significant amount of carbon emissions which take place. Other than that, the farmers, when they are able to produce that solar energy through those solar panels, they will also have the availability of the option where they can basically sell that surplus power back into the grid and earn additional amount of income as well. So the aim of the Kusum Yojana is to provide energy and water security to the farmers, because now the farmers, they don't have to be dependent on electrical supply. With the help of the solar panels, they can basically run the tube wells whenever they want. Then de-dieselize the farm sector, make the farm sector free of the usage of diesel, and reduce the pollution in the process. That is the aspect of PM Kusum. Now, the government has also brought about a production linked incentive scheme, PLI scheme, whereby it is basically in a way incentivizing, encouraging, and promoting the production of solar cell component manufacturing in the country. Because here again, we need to be self dependent, we need to be Atmanirbhar. Because in the case of the solar panels, yes, we are going for increased installation of solar power all across the country, but we simultaneously have to understand that majority of the solar panels, they are only assembled in India. They are basically manufactured in China, assembled in India. So we need to have our own domestic manufacturing ecosystem up and running. Also, you have the green energy corridors, whereby the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, that is the ministry which is promoting renewable energy sources to create intra-state transmission system for renewable energy, for example, solar power, wind power, etc. Okay, for example, solar power, wind power, etc. Okay, PLI Misbah, very simply put, if I have to tell you what the PLI scheme is, PLI is a scheme brought in by the government to encourage the productivity and production of the manufacturing sector by providing certain incentives. If you meet certain production targets, you will be provided with certain incentives. So that is a kind of a scheme which always brings about the benefit of additional production, and the long term goal is to establish India as a manufacturing powerhouse. Okay, MNRE is Ministry of Non and Renewable New and Renewable Energy. Okay, now while carrying out this process of being more eco-friendly and environmental friendly, yes, we have certain areas which are looking good for us. For example, in Modhera, a village in the that is Modhera is a village in the Mehsana district of Gujarat, where the very famous you have very famous architectural building there. Let me see if anybody can talk about it. Which is the architectural wonder that you have at Modhera? Beautiful. Very, very good. Obviously, school won't be there. I won't call school as an architectural marvel. It is the Sun Temple. Very good, guys. So, Sun Temple is present at Modhera. So, The entire region has basically been converted into a region which is now running only on renewable energy. And this has happened through a very distinct and a deep partnership between the central and the state government, where now you have in the village of Modera, you have almost all the houses having the installation of rooftop solar. Now during the daytime, these solar panels, they are sufficient to for these households to operate all the electrical equipments and gadgets that they can. And during the night time, all the energy from the solar panel, that is something which is already directed to a battery system, which is 60 kilometers away from this village of Modera. And from that battery system, you get the energy to operate the electrical gadgets during night time. So what it has brought about is a kind of a reliability of electrical provision for the local community. Now local community no longer needs to be dependent that I don't know whether the state government will supply us or not, or the central government will supply us electricity or not. They don't have to be dependent on that. They are self sufficient now. And also as a result of that, when you get electricity easily, then obviously you get in a position to utilize as many electrical devices as you can. And when you get into that position, that opens up new areas, new opportunities for younger generation. For example, let's take any one of us. Now suppose one of you might be the budding content creators of tomorrow. Maybe one of you want to establish or open up your own YouTube channel, and maybe you want to create your own content out there. Now, if suppose you are living in an area where there is no electricity, obviously your creativity will be hindered, your output will be suffering, and maybe you won't be able to realize the economic incentive that you otherwise could have. And comparatively, in an area where a person is getting all the electrical supply reliably, they are much free to explore all the more options. So this also brings about with it a kind of an economic prosperity that is associated with. If we consider various different states, the states themselves, they have basically created a kind of a situation or a kind of an ambitious target for themselves. For example, Uttar Pradesh, a target of producing 22,000 megawatt of electricity from solar energy. That is the target which has been set. Now, this includes the target of 14,000 megawatt of electricity through solar parks, close to around 4,500 megawatts through rooftop solar residential, close to around 1,500 megawatts through rooftop non-residential buildings. There also you will install solar panels, 2,000 megawatts through PM Kusum. So overall, Uttar Pradesh in itself is aiming to generate 22,000 megawatts of energy by solar power in general. The Energy Conservation Bill has been passed, which focuses on the use of non-fossil energy and decarbonize the Indian economy. So all these are basically nothing but measures which have been taken by the national and the state government. And the case in point, the success story is that of Modhera in Mehsana. So that tells you that yes, we need to combat the conditions of climate change. These are the governmental steps that have been taken. And what do we need? And what do we need to take care when we move ahead into the future? First of all, if we adhere to all these norms and all these policies, that is something which will help us meet international obligations by various different treaty organizations, by various different conventions that India is a part of, be it UNFCCC, be it CBD. In all these international obligations that we have, we'll be able to fulfill our own words. Then we need to ensure that the public is also aware about all these various measures, and the public is equally sensitized, if not more, about the importance of going carbon neutral and how it is important for our quality of life as well if we move to renewables. Then there needs to be a greater synergy between the public and the private sector for more cutting edge research. For example, the solar panels which are being developed, how to make them more efficient, how to extract more power out of them. So this is something that needs to be brought in, inculcated. Only then can we truly capitalize on the potential that lies in front of India, provided that India is a tropical country, means receives sunlight throughout the year. Okay? Now, the questions, synergy is a kind of a kind of, if you think about it, a kind of a concerted effort to achieve a particular goal, a joint effort to achieve a particular goal. Yes, Sarabjit, that is correct. Cutting edge basically, Ibtisam, cutting edge is basically the newer technology, right? Very new technology, which is not prevalent anywhere else. Yes, Arun, that is also something which can be written. Okay. Synergy means greater synchronization, greater collaboration. That is what is represented by synergy. Anish, that is an important question that you have asked. That basically, is PM Kusum viable? Well, if implemented truly and honestly, it is something which has got a lot of potential. So, yes. Okay. Now, the type of question that you can expect from here. So, in order to mitigate the impact of climate change, it is essential to reduce emissions and switch to renewables. In light of the above statement, discuss the governmental policies being pursued in order to mitigate the impact of climate change as experienced in the country. So, how do you write the answer to this? So, in the introduction part, write a brief introduction that how India is also suffering from the impact of the climate change. So it is in the national interest to devise policies which mitigate the impact of climate change. So that will be your introduction, 25 words to 30 words. Then come to the main body. In the body portion, you talk about the governmental steps, policies, and measures. Right? Eventually, when you describe all this in the conclusion, you can write that conclusion can be a kind of a way forward as well, that going ahead into the future, India needs to tap into newer innovative methodologies, create more public awareness about the entire scenario. Only then can we truly achieve what we desire. So that kind of a conclusion you can make in a positive light. Always write conclusion is a positive light in an optimistic tone. That is very much essential. Okay. Then we come to the second topic of the day, that is India, a green hydrogen global hub. Now, here, first of all, the entire topic, what does it talk about? It talks about establishing India as one of the global hubs where green hydrogen can be manufactured, and that green hydrogen can then be exported, can be sent to various different countries for utilization. That is where the green hydrogen global hub comes in. Okay. Now, here, first of all, something which is very, very important for your examination, both for your prelims as well as mains, is what do we mean by green hydrogen? What do we understand by green hydrogen? First of all, you have to understand that hydrogen, that is H2, that is something which is utilized as a as a fuel, right? So when hydrogen is burned, undergoes combustion, that is where you have H2 plus O2, that ends up forming H2O, right? So the output is not any kind of emission, but water and water vapor which is produced as a result of it. So obviously, hydrogen is referred to as a clean fuel. It is also a fuel which does not cause any emission. So hydrogen is desirable. But how do you produce that hydrogen? That is what leads to the classification of hydrogen into gray hydrogen, black hydrogen, turquoise hydrogen, blue hydrogen, green hydrogen, and so on. Now, here, green hydrogen. This is basically produced by a process of electrolysis, right? This is produced by the process of electrolysis. Now, electrolysis is something that you would have basically observed or studied earlier, that when we talk about electrolysis, what do? In a kind of a container, you basically insert two electrodes. Electrodes have differing and opposing charges in many of the cases, and you fill it up with a liquid. right? And you connect it. So that is how you have the flow of particles which take place. So by this process, when you carry out this electrolysis in water, water breaks down into H2 and O2, right? So that is how hydrogen is produced. But even for this electrolysis which takes place, you do need energy. Energy needs to be supplied, only then electrolysis will take place. So where do you get that energy from? So you get that energy from renewables. That is why the hydrogen which is produced is green hydrogen. So basically, renewable energy, you will observe renewables, renewable form of energy that is supplied to what? To the electrolyzer. Electrolyzer is the device in which this process of breaking of water into hydrogen and oxygen takes place. And that is when eventually you have the production of H2. Production of H2. Now, because the energy utilized for this is greener, it is renewable, that is why it is green hydrogen. Now, India as a country has got a significant potential and a significant opportunity to produce a lot of green hydrogen. How and why? Basically, India as a country, if you will observe, then we are present in the tropical region of the world. Being present in the tropical region of the world means we have the exposure to huge amount of sunlight on a very regular basis. Now, that availability of sunlight means what? We can have more solar energy. We can have more renewable energy generated. So more the ability to generate renewable energy, that means more should be the ability to produce green hydrogen as well. There is only one hiccup in the way, and that is the electrolyzer technology. We also need to have the electrolyzer technology. For this, we have various different companies, private sector in India, for example, Reliance, for example, Godrej, for example, Hinduja Group, for which you have Ashok Leyland and all of them, they Mahindra and Mahindra, all of them, they have entered into deals and treaties and understandings with various different automakers, various different manufacturers in order to set up that green hydrogen generation capacity. But you also have to be mindful of another thing. It is not as if till today, let's say I have a car, let's suppose that car runs on petroleum. It is not as if till today it was running on petroleum. Today I bring in hydrogen from somewhere, I fill the vehicle with hydrogen and it will continue to run. No. In order to run a vehicle on hydrogen, or in order to help an industry run on hydrogen, you need to basically redesign the machines as well. You need to redesign the equipments as well. So that begs the question, that is the world ready to adapt to hydrogen? That is where a major challenge lies before we establish India as a global hub. So let us understand that. So the objective basically. So here, first of all, why this topic is in discussion is because of the fact that Indian government had launched the National Green Hydrogen Mission. The objective of the mission is to promote development of green hydrogen production capacity to at least 5 million metric tons per annum, right? With an associated renewable energy capacity addition of 125 gigawatts by around 2030. That is the aim set by what? National Green Hydrogen Mission. Okay. So this mission, when we talk about, we are talking about National Deshmukh. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Green Hydrogen Mission. Anjali, electrolyzer refers to that equipment in which the process of electrolysis is carried out. That is, what is the electrolyzer? Okay. Now, this is basically the National Green Hydrogen Mission. I have attached images which was released by the government itself. These images have not been compiled by me. So the government, the PIB, has generated these images. This you should use as a reliable source of information. So cabinet has basically approved 19,400, 700 crores worth of this green hydrogen mission. That includes an outlay of around 17,500 crores for the SITE program. What is that SITE program? It is the Strategic Interventions for Green Hydrogen Transition Program. Now, it will fund the domestic manufacturing of electrolyzers and will also produce green hydrogen, so that there is a development of an ecosystem. You cannot have a situation where you have production of green hydrogen in Andhra Pradesh, in Assam, in Gujarat, but nobody is there to use it out. So that is where you need the development of the entire ecosystem. So for that, 17,400 crores have been allocated in the program, that is the SITE program. So a prelims type question can be framed from here, that SITE program is associated with green hydrogen, climate change, and so on. So you should be aware of that. Now, 1466 crore for the new pilot projects. By the way, when we are dealing with these numbers, one important thing, do we need to learn this data point? How many of you feel that it is important for us to learn all the numbers which are there? Very good. So at least we are clear in that regard. You don't need to learn these data pointers. The data that you need to learn is approximately what is the outlay for National Green Hydrogen Program. That is something you should be aware of. Okay. It is not important for you to learn that 400 crore or 450 crore has been allocated for R&D or so on. Please don't remember that. Please don't clutter your mind with these details. Okay. Now, these are some listed salient features for the mission, that is the green hydrogen mission. So basically, creation of export opportunities for green hydrogen and its derivatives. So one of you were asking, can we export green hydrogen? Absolutely yes. In containers, you can always end up exporting green hydrogen. Just like, for example, in large ships, you have the liquefied natural gas, LNG, which comes in, right? Just like that, yes, you need better pressurized containers and so on, but you can nonetheless export it. Now, which countries will take green hydrogen from us? Suppose the non-tropical countries, which are situated in the temperate area where you don't have that much amount of solar rays coming in. So obviously you don't have the capacity to generate as much amount of renewables. So there, those countries, if they require green hydrogen, well, we can be the suppliers. Facilitate demand creation, production, utilization, and export of green hydrogen. Then support pilot projects in emerging areas. Public private partnership framework for research and development, that also needs to be carried out. Now, manufacturers of green hydrogen or green ammonia and the renewable energy plant, they shall be given connectivity to the grid as well for better infrastructure availability. For example, Adani's, they have started the entire program under Adani Petrochemicals, where they are working on green hydrogen, green methane, green ammonia, because the industry requires these gases. It is how you produce those gases which eventually will matter. If not today, 3 years down the line, it will always matter. So it is always beneficial for us right now to provide the conducive conditions so that the industry picks it up and the industry becomes the leader across the globe. Single portal related to the mission for ease of doing business, so that you don't get stuck in getting clearances. My aim is to conserve the nature, to preserve the nature, but what am I doing is I'm standing in front of a line in a government office just to get a clearance. So in order to solve that, you have this single window clearances as well. Now, manufacturers of green hydrogen, green ammonia shall be allowed to set up bunkers near ports for storage of these materials for shipping and export. Now, these bunkers or these logistical points, they are also very relevant, so that it provides you with a kind of a flexibility that, okay, a demand has come in for let's say 20 containers. So if I have that storage area, I can immediately ship it up and sell it out. So that is the aspect of the features of this mission. Now, the outcome which is expected, that is the expectations of the mission. Expectations. If government is spending around 19,000 crore, obviously it will have an expectation of its own. So what are the expectations? First of all, if you think about it, development of a capacity to generate at least 5 million metric ton, 5 million metric ton per annum. Now, in doing that, we have already seen that we will be able to generate a renewable energy capacity of 125 gigawatt. Along with that, around 8 lakh crore in total investment that is supposed to create 6 lakh new jobs in the sector of green hydrogen alone. Think about it. That much amount of investment, what will it do to our foreign exchange reserves, what it will do to our technological proficiency, and also establishing a kind of a manufacturing powerhouse in India. Over 1 lakh crore cumulative reduction in fossil fuel imports. So our foreign exchange reserves will be further saved. So these are few of the basic expectations. And this will also help us, by the way, to meet our international commitments that we have held earlier for all the international bodies and organizations that we have talked about. Then the benefit, creation of export opportunities for green hydrogen and its derivatives, decarbonization of various industry, for example fertilizer industry, they will not be so much dependent on fossil fuel now. Steel industry, we can reduce the fossil fuel dependency of the steel industry as well. Reduction in dependence on imported fossil fuel and the feedstock, forex will be saved. Development of indigenous manufacturing capabilities, job creation. So these are the benefits that will accrue to us. But if we have so many opportunities and if there are so many things which will work in our favor, why don't we go running ahead? Because there are certain challenges which lie in front of us. Now, when we talk about these challenges, first of all, if let's say I want to establish a kind of a setup, a production facility which produces that green hydrogen, but in order to set up and install that, that is a very costly process in itself. It is also a time consuming process, and it is also a process which requires a lot of technological expertise. So here, scaling up the hydrogen production, it is very costly and an uphill task. Maybe I'm able to produce 5 million tons, right? But to take it to 8 million tons, I will have to spend significantly more. But then, something which is a greater challenge, that is basically a doubt whether hydrogen would become a popular fuel in future. Right now, the world is talking about hydrogen. It might absolutely be possible that because of various stakeholders and oil producing nations, there is so much of pressure and lobbying created that maybe the automakers, they never switch over to hydrogen fuel. Maybe the automakers, they start developing electric vehicles, but they never develop hydrogen vehicles. Because please understand, hydrogen also has got the same fear of safety associated with it. For example, the kind of fear that you have with the CNG and LNG vehicles, that they can explode, they can catch fire, something which is very similar in electric vehicles as well, but it is much more exaggerated in the case of hydrogen. Not many people are comfortable loading hydrogen on their backs and moving away randomly. So that is where we have to be very cautious. Is the world going to adopt this fuel just like we have? If not, then all this technological innovation, it will serve only the domestic market. That is also huge nonetheless, but it will not serve the international purpose. Then manufacturing electrolyzers is costly and is limited to few developed nations. And in fact, it is the country of China which is accumulating significant amount of this electrolyzer technology. One by one, piece by piece, China is accumulating various parts of the technology for production of electrolyzer. And it is estimated by 2030, if the things go as they are, China will control around 30 to 40% of the global market for electrolyzer technology. So again, we will be left in the same position as we are in the case of solar panels, where production is being done in China. All we are doing is we are importing that. So we need to be Atmanirbhar in the manufacturing of these electrolyzers as well. Now, the use of hydrogen requires a major shift in the existing energy landscape and how the energy is being used, right? It will not only become unfeasible financially, so replacing existing infrastructure, that has to be done. Now, that is not a cheap process where all the existing machineries, all the existing engines, etc., everything you start changing in order to make it conducive for hydrogen. So that is where we do face certain challenges. But when we talk about the future is opportune and bright. Asia Pacific region is the fastest growing area in the green hydrogen market. For example, if you consider the region of China, India, both of these combined in together, they themselves can drive the global markets. Then by the end of this decade, India wants to produce large amounts. So there is a kind of a green light at the end of it. And India plans to add significant amount, around 175 gigawatts of energy capacity by green hydrogen based energy. It is in the process of finalizing a roadmap for becoming a green hydrogen economy, which would require a tremendous amount of investment to be done as well. And overall, all these initiatives would have to attract an investment close to around rupees 30 trillion. Think about it. Rupees 30 trillion is the total amount of investment that will be required. Now, when you invest so much in the country, it flows back into the economy, it generates job in the process, it creates infrastructure in the process. So the entire economy ends up benefiting much more than 30 trillion itself. So it will benefit the economy provided we are mindful of the challenges which befall in front of us. So from here, very simple question that you can get, or you can expect actually a simple question, that is, discuss the process of production of green hydrogen. Here I would suggest to you, with the help of a flow chart, you discuss it and you describe it. However, when we talk about the initial portion, that is the introduction, in the introduction you write about basics of green hydrogen, what it is, right? What of it? That is what you write in the introduction. In the body part, you write about the process of production. Then you talk about the benefits of the National Green Hydrogen Mission. In conclusion, you talk about the fact that how in the changing landscape of the world, when everybody is trying to combat climate change, this can be a fresh ray of hope that India should definitely hold on to in order to save millions of its citizens. So, like that, you can basically frame the answer. Okay, right? Then we come to the third topic, and that is development of defense export ecosystem. Now, defense export ecosystem, here it talks about how India ends up exporting the various defense equipments that it has and how India is exporting it to the world. Now, before moving into it, one thing that you have to understand in order to get the larger picture. Now, India as a country has been making international headlines. International headlines not only today, not only yesterday, not only the previous year, but for the last couple of decades. India has been making international headlines for being the largest arms importer across the world. We end up spending one of the largest chunks of money in terms of the economies in importing arms, be it guns, be it bulletproof vest, be it the helmets, be it the Kevlar, the protection equipment, be it the tanks, be it the airplanes, everything we end up importing. So that is why India has always been referred to as the import market of defense products. But lately, there has been a kind of a visible change into it from various systems, such as in your screen, the image that you see, which kind of equipment it is. Let me see if anybody is able to figure out. This is something that you see in Republic Day parades. What is it that is indicated in the image? Very good. Ambika, Abhishek, Bittu, Divya, Jairam, Kapil, Amey, good. Ilosh also good. Shanawaz also good. This is your BrahMos missile. This. That is the BrahMos missile. So, recently, there has been a kind of a change in the entire dynamics of it. Recently, I mean, for the past 4 to 5 years, India has started producing its own equipments. And India has started producing its equipments. And many of the times, when we think about defense expenditure, a kind of a misinformation comes into our mind that defense means manufacturing large missiles and large planes and large ships. No, defense equipment which can save significant amount of cost can be as simple as a small gun to a kind of an automatic rifle to the bulletproof vests that you have to the antenna to the signal jammers. All these electronic equipments, they are significant amount of defense manufacturing which is now being done in our own country. Not only are we manufacturing things on our own, still not to the level that is required, but still we have started it. But there is a lot of scope to export it even further. So, India's defense sector has witnessed a quantum jump over the past few years. This is primarily because of the changed reorientation of the government to view the defense sector as an emerging exporter instead of net importer. Now, when we talk about the state of defense exports from India, it has been improving in recent years, but nonetheless, there is still a lot to be done because still, if you will observe the types of materials that India is exporting, these are not high tech materials that we are exporting. These are slightly lower on the technological ladder, and these are not the best of the equipments that we end up selling. There is again a kind of a compromise. As a result of that, many of the richer countries and richer economies, they look in the other direction when they want to import items rather than looking at India, right? So India has been, even though successful in exporting products such as personal protective items, offshore patrol vessels, and even avionics that you deploy in the aircraft, that has been exported to certain countries. However, there is a need to increase the value of defense exports and target larger markets. Value of defense exports, what you are exporting, that needs to be, the larger items need to be exported. India has failed to convert interest from various countries in Southeast Asian nations with regards to the equipments that India has been manufacturing. And that has primarily been because of what are the equipments that we manufacture. We are not manufacturing the latest technological equipments. We are still somewhere behind that. So, India's defense exports overall, if you observe this trend, observe the graph first. Now, in the graph, if you will observe the exports in around 2014, 2015. This was how much? Around 1941 crores. Then from there, 1941 crores. From there, observe that in 2021-22, we reached a staggering figure close to around almost 13,000 crores. So, from 1.9k crores to almost 13k. So you can think about the stupendous increase. Now, here again, in 2022-23, already in the 6 months, we have surpassed an export of 8,000 crores. So obviously, we are well on set to reach the target and overachieve what we have sold in the previous year. So this is a kind of a rising tide, if you will call it that. Now here, obviously the numbers will look very nice, that it will surpass estimated US $2.2 billion in terms of defense exports. But yes, indeed, we cannot shy away from the fact that regardless of all this data that you see, we are not even scratching the surface of the export market. The global arms market is tremendous, is huge, for trillions of dollars. We can exploit that. United States, many of the companies in United States, from, let's say, we talk about Boeing to Northrop Grumman to Lockheed Martin, all of them, they have become billion-dollar companies, billion-dollar organizations based upon defense contracts. Similarly, if you observe China, China is also developing many of the industries based upon the exports it is generating. We have to reach that level where Indian arms, they become a kind of a preference for all the countries, not a kind of a compulsion that, okay, because we have less money, that is why we are buying Indian arms. No, it should be a case that because we want the best equipments, that is why we are buying Indian arms and ammunitions. So overall, around the world, if you will observe, then the 14 countries which are in a way importing Indian defense equipment, you will find that this is something which is spread all across the world, from Poland to Saudi Arabia to UAE, right? Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar, Philippines. So you have a spread and an entire gamut of nations who are interested. Now, even countries like Armenia have been added to the list. So the list keeps on getting more and more elaborate as we move ahead. Now, here, please understand, you have various competitors in the line. Iran is one of those. Turkey is one of those. They are also manufacturing cutting edge technology or newer technology, and that too at a very cheap price. The drone technology that Turkey is manufacturing and the drones that Iran is building, that is something that India is still not managed to produce. The Bayraktar drones produced by Iran. Now, think about it. Think about the diplomatic edge that the countries take. Turkey produces a drone. Now, that drone is utilized by Ukraine in Russia-Ukraine war. Simultaneously, Turkey is supplying Russia with ammunitions as well. So, in a way, it is arming both sides of the conflict. And as long as the conflict goes on, Turkey will become more and more important in global committee of nations. At the same time, it will become richer and richer as well. So this is a kind, not the exact kind of a situation that India wants to be in, but India wants to be a scenario where it is a preferred importer or preferred exporter of these equipment. So these are the basic exports from India: weapon simulators, tear gas launchers, torpedo launching mechanism, alarm monitoring and control system, night vision binoculars. Now, around 10 years back, we had a situation where even our forces, we did not have night vision. Now we are in a position to export them. So obviously, we have come some way. But yes, a lot needs to be covered. So what are the challenges that India faces? The obstacles that lie in our way. So basically, first of all, we have discussed about this lack of competitiveness. We don't have the best of the equipments which are manufactured. What is torpedo? Torpedo is HF radios. Sunny is the high frequency radios used for communication. Torpedoes basically, see, when you are moving in sea on water, let's suppose, let's suppose you are on a large frigate or a destroyer, right? And here you have the enemy who is moving in a submarine, right? Who's moving in a submarine. Now, how do you destroy that submarine? Do you start using guns? No. Do you use missiles? No. In this case, you use the torpedoes. These are the ones which move underwater with the help of a propulsion system, and they will simply go ahead and attack. So that is the torpedo. Okay. Now, here we have the lack of competitiveness in terms of the equipment that we manufacture, the platforms that we manufacture. For example, India has been trying to export its light combat aircraft, that is Tejas, right? India has been trying to pitch it to various different countries. Now, many of the countries, you'll find that they will prefer either to buy F-16, or they will try to buy, or they would prefer to buy the Chinese and the Pakistani made JF-17, etc. Now, why is that? Because simply put, our products are still not very competitive. BrahMos. BrahMos is a missile which is one of the best missiles in the entire world. Look at the interest and the demand that BrahMos is experiencing or that BrahMos is receiving. So if you have the best of the technology, the world will be at your doorsteps to buy it. Otherwise, it will be a kind of a compulsion for the others. Limited export portfolio, it is not as if we export all kinds of machineries, only sometimes or some types of it. You also have bureaucratic hurdles in the entire process of production, right? Many of the things we have the technology, but we are not producing because of bureaucratic hurdles, the red tapeism that is present, lack of clear cut policy with regards to what is it that we see ourselves exporting 10 years down the line. Do we see ourselves as, let's say, because as a country we have the expertise to manufacture aircraft carriers, large aircraft carriers, do we have the policy that we will make more and we will export? No, we don't have. Do we have the policy that, okay, we will make aircrafts which we will also export? No, we don't have. Do we have the policy that we will make submarines that we will export? No, we don't have. So we don't have a clear cut policy vision that what is it that we are developing specially for the export market, etc. For example, look at one of the competitors, that is Lockheed Martin of United States, who makes the very famous F-16, F-22. All of that is made by Lockheed Martin. Now, in order to basically come to Indian market, Lockheed Martin announced that we are going to design a special aircraft for you, right? And they named that special aircraft specially for India. So that is where you are devising a plan in order to cater to the future. That is when you attract participation and interest from the market. That is something which is lacking. And still, till now, we are heavily dependent on import of critical systems, critical components to help make our entire equipment more functional. So that will always be a kind of an hindrance. So what do we do moving ahead and going forward? So basically, the dedicated export infrastructure. So for that, you need certain dedicated PSUs, public sector undertakings, or the private sector needs to step in, and they need to start developing critical technologies. They need to start producing items specially for global export, because that will earn them significant amount of foreign exchange, that will generate jobs, and with greater jobs, obviously you get a better ability to focus more on research. So that is where it is a kind of a self-propelling mechanism, if you can call it. Then a dedicated export promotion council, a deep understanding of international protocols and agreements. For example, what is the nuclear security group, all of that, nuclear suppliers group, what is the Wassenaar agreement. So all the international conventions and agreements with regards to defense equipment, we need to train our diplomats in that, so that we also have Indian missions abroad. They can also pick up these issues of trade of defense equipments. So trade support by speeding of approvals that we provide. Indian missions abroad can serve as diplomatic support for negotiations and exploring opportunities, newer markets, newer opportunities. For that, you can take the help of the high commissions that we have in various different areas as well. Then R&D infrastructure. R&D is research and development. So research on cutting edge technologies means, I will write the meaning here, newer technology. So the more newer technology that you are able to manufacture, better and greater will be the demand of that technology. The entire world will want to buy that, isn't it? Collaboration with other nations for the development of joint platforms. In the case of BrahMos, we had collaborated with Russia, and that is how BrahMos is named, after Moskva and Brahmaputra, the two rivers. That is how BrahMos is made. So that is where we need such collaborations. For example, even the like-minded or like-minded economies, the same level economies, we can enter into a collaboration, let's say, to produce the next generation of battle tanks. You never know. And that can be used for international markets. So such collaborations, they always give you high returns in the longer run. Okay. Now, the question discuss the challenges in the way of India becoming a net exporter of defense equipment in the world, briefly mention the way forward for India and the opportunities present. Again, a very simple and a straightforward question. In this, when you are writing the introduction, in the intro, here you talk about that what traditionally has been the outlook of India. India has been a net importer of weapons. So, from that, how does India envisage a movement into net exporter? So, in the intro, write that traditionally India has been a net importer, where it relies more on import on weapon systems as compared to the domestic production. However, in the recent years, there has been a strategic and a significant paradigm shift observed in the defense sector, where now many of the defense systems are made primarily for export oriented market, and that is where the situation or the scenario is changing. That marks an end to your introduction, around 25-30 words in the body. Then begin by writing that what are the challenges that befall in front of India, elaborate each of these significantly, and then the way forward and the opportunities that we have present. Okay, right? Okay, a few of the questions I will take at the end. Don't worry about it. I will take at the end as much as possible. Okay. Then we move on to the fourth topic, and that is global sea level rise, state of global climate report. So, this state of global climate report 2022, this was generated by World Meteorological Organization. Shakib, in conclusion for that portion, you can simply write about the aspect of how the future beckons significantly well for India and Indian economy, as and when we explore growing markets across the world, that augurs well not only for our own defense forces, but also for the larger Indian economy. Okay. So now we talk about the World Meteorological Organization and the State of Global Climate Report that has been furnished by the World Meteorological Organization. Now, this has been in significant amount of detailed discussion for the past month, and you will find frequent mention and frequent usage of this particular report throughout the past month. So, what is it? So, global sea level rise. So this report, which is generated by World Meteorological Organization, that is basically talking about the implications of global sea level rise. And it also draws a kind of an analogy with respect to how much is the sea level rising. Now, please understand, the sea level across the planet, it is not rising for the first time. It has risen significantly in the past, okay? And moving ahead millions of years, again, it is set to rise because the planet goes through various different phases of heating and natural cooling, where it gets heated up and again it gets cooled down. In fact, the sea level that we see today, 125,000 years ago or 1,25,000 years ago, the sea level was higher by around 5 to 10 meters. Imagine a sea level which was higher by 5 to 10 meters. Many islands that we see today would have been completely drowned. So the sea level is again rising up. It is the rate of the rise. That is something which is very worrying. So let us take a look at the background of this report slightly. Is it important to note who published the report? Absolutely yes. Always yes. It is very relevant, very important to know who published the report, what is the report for your prelims examination. Now, according to the World Meteorological Organization report, that is Global Sea Level Rise and Implications, India, China, Bangladesh, and the Netherlands, they face the highest threat of sea level rise globally. Now, why is it that the sea level rises in the first place? Why do we experience the rise of sea level across the globe? The reason is very simple, due to global warming. Global warming. Now, due to this global warming, what ends up happening is, first of all, increased heat leads to the thermal expansion of water, leading to an overall rise. Then increased melting of ice and glaciers has further added to the rise. So basically, due to the increased heating which is received, the temperatures that we are experiencing, that is increasing day by day. So because of that increased heat, the water in itself, that also tends to expand ever so slightly. Just like when you provide heat to any substance, that substance tends to expand. Just like that, water also tends to expand. And when that water tends to expand, that creates a condition of a sea level rise. Okay. Now, here you will observe that India, China, Bangladesh, and the Netherlands, they face the highest threat of sea level rise. Why Netherlands? That is because Netherlands is one of those countries in Europe where majority of the landmass of Netherlands, that is situated below sea level. So here, majority of the landmass majority of the landmass is below sea level. So what is the implication of it? That means even if there is a slightest rise in water level, many of these areas, they will get flooded much more frequently, and the impact will be much more long drawn. But then, what about the countries of India, Bangladesh, and China? Now here, all these countries, they have a very large coastline and coastal region. So any rise in sea level automatically brings with itself the possibilities of coastal flooding. They also bring about the possibilities of, in the coastal landscape, the local community losing their traditional agricultural practices. Why? Because let's say your farmland is situated in a coastline, and if the seawater comes in, that makes your farmland very salty and saline. Even when the seawater goes back, your farmland is not suitable enough to grow crops anymore. So that is something which is absolutely worrisome. So that is where you have to understand that this is something which puts a lot of lives and a lot of basic occupations in India, China, Bangladesh at significant amount of risk. Okay, Shagufta, this is a very beautiful scenario to be in. See, there are two good scenarios to be in. One good scenario is where you are understanding everything. Okay, that is where you get very confident. And other beautiful scenario to be in is where you don't understand anything. There also you are absolutely neutral with regards to the various different concepts, that what is being taught. Fair enough, we were talking about hydrogen, then we came to exports, then we came to some other topic. So whichever scenario you are in right now, one thing that you can do is try to pinpoint the areas that you have not understood. Right, it cannot be the case that from the first sentence itself I have not got anything. So that can only be if you are blankly staring. I hope that is not the case. So whichever point you have not understood, spell it out, point it out. We will solve it for you. Don't worry. Okay. Now, Sri Lanka and Maldives, yes, Rajkumar, they will also be endangered significantly. But the number of lives which will be affected in terms of the absolute population, that is where India, China, obviously, most populous countries, and Bangladesh also. Right. So, see, in the case of multitasking, if you are doing multitasking with civil services, that in itself is a very brave act that you are taking in. So, fair enough. So, the sea level rise. So, the sea level rise basically that threatens low lying small islands. Many of the low lying small islands they get threatened. So, the impact of the sea level rise are boosted by storm surges and tidal variation. What are storm surges? So, for example, if suppose this is the land and this is the water. So, this in the case of the water body, suppose this is the sea. In general, you would observe that with the winds comes the waves as well. Sometimes, when the winds they are much stronger, they are coming from farther distance away, then the waves which are generated are even significantly higher. So, like this, you have the generation of these large waves whenever the winds get very strong. And that is what is referred to as storm surges. So, whenever these storm surges happen, they always flood the coastal area, or the coastal landscape is significantly flooded as a result of that. So, basically, here you will get a kind of a comparison that between 1901 to 2018, the sea level rise which has been experienced is around 0.2 meters. Now you might think of it that it is not significant, but then 0.2 meter, look at how. So in 70 years, 1901 to 1971, it rose by only around 1.3 millimeter per year. Then between 71 to 2006, around 35 years, it rose at a rate of 1.9 millimeter per year. So look at it. The rate of sea level rise that is increasing. Then between 2006 and 2018, it further increased to 3.7 millimeter per year. That is the rate at which it was rising. And in fact, the latest estimates carried out by World Meteorological Organization, they indicate that in the previous decade, that is from 2013 to 2022, we are expecting a rise of somewhere close to 4.5 millimeter of rise every year. So, if that rate of rise of sea level continues to happen, then the implications are significantly humongous. Basically, if you will observe, the rate of ice sheet loss that increased by a factor of 4. The rate at which, when we talk about ice sheets here, we are generally talking about the polar region, right? In the region of the Arctic, in the region of Antarctica, in the region of Greenland. So that is where the rate at which the ice is being lost. Why will the ice be lost? Because of warming. So it has increased and exaggerated itself quite significantly. Okay. Now, here, when we talk about the factors which are responsible for the sea level rise, factors responsible. Right. So here, first of all, around 50% of that sea level rise is attributed to thermal expansion. Expansion. So that thermal expansion is responsible for 50% of the rise in sea level. Now, this forms your important trivia for your prelims, because generally we think about it that which is the factor which is responsible for sea level rise. Immediately the answer comes melting of ice and snow. Obviously, unless and until we are doing multitasking, etc. But generally, the first thing that comes into mind is that because of ice sheet which would melt, because of glaciers which would melt. But that is not the case. Majority of the or significant portion of sea level rise that you observe is because of thermal expansion. Okay. Now, Then around 22% is because of ice loss from glaciers, and 20% is because of loss of ice sheet. What is thermal expansion? Okay, thermal expansion is basically when anything expands due to heat. If I have this material in my hand, suppose, and if I heat it up, what will happen? It will expand. That is thermal expansion. So similarly, when we talk about the sea water or the ocean water as well, so that is also receiving significant amount of heat, right, because of global warming. So there also you have a kind of a thermal expansion which is due. Okay. Now, then basically here you will see that World Meteorological Organization, it has also generated a kind of a predictability model, that if the situation goes on like this, what will be the sea level rise in the future. Predictability model is something like, for example, if I observe your level of preparation and I make a prediction that if the preparation goes like this, you will take 4 attempts, you will take 5 attempts, or maybe you will take 6 attempts, or maybe you will quit after first. So that is a kind of a predictability model. So based upon the current trends that we find in the sea level change, that predictability model has been created. So over the next 2000 years, global mean sea level will rise by around 2 to 3 centimeter. It will depend on how much we are limiting the rise, and that in turn will be dependent upon the fact that what is it that we are doing in terms of the temperature control. So over the next 2000 years in general, global mean sea level will rise by about 2 to 3 meters if warming is limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which almost seems like an impossible task. It is very difficult for us to limit the warming to only 1.5 degrees Celsius. The sea level will be rising up till around 6 meters if warming is restricted to 2 degrees Celsius, and a whopping 19 to 22 meters of sea level rise if warming increases, which is most probable, to 5 degrees Celsius. And all this warming, we are comparing it to what? We are comparing it to pre-industrial era, right, before the industrial revolution set in. So that is about the future, what the future beckons or holds in front of us. Now the implication for India is also significantly manifold. For example, you will have experienced coastal floods, more storm surges, so more coastal areas under seawater. Now when an area comes under seawater, it is left with almost an unutilizable state of condition. Agricultural loss of production will happen, which will be significant in the coastal communities. There will be loss of biodiversity, particularly the mangrove species, particularly the ecotone areas in between the seawater and the terrestrial ecosystem. In all those areas, there will be a lot of biodiversity which will be lost. And coastal communities, they will lose their profession, occupation, income source, and in many of the cases, their households as well, and the places that they live in. So the impact that India will face is manifold. So that is why what can be done to stop it? Manage climate change. Okay. So the question, discuss the impact of climate change on global sea level. What shall be the implications for India? Now, this is a very probable question for all those who are going to appear this year. This is a question that UPSC has been trying to turn it around and ask it in different manner. This year, with the release of this report, it provides a very easy opportunity for UPSC to ask this question directly. So do expect this question. So the impact of climate change on global sea level, you can talk about it. You can talk about the trend as well, that it has been rising significantly. Then after that, what shall be the implication of India? That is what you talk in the body portion. Okay. Now, the second last topic of the day, that is being Atmanirbhar in climate finance, which basically talks about self-sufficiency when it comes to the climate finance. Now here, before talking about Atmanirbhar, I'm sure if anything else or not, right now, one word that you would be absolutely clear in your mind what is the meaning of it, it will be Atmanirbhar. So I'm sure I won't need to be explaining the meaning of Atmanirbhar. Having said that, Atmanirbharta refers to a kind of a self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency. So, what is this climate finance? And why do we need that? And then why are we talking about self-sufficiency in climate finance? So the climate is changing around us. As the climate is changing around us, we need to be able to adapt to the changing climate. And when we say being able to adapt to the changing climate, one has to understand that, for example, suppose, let's take the case of India. Now, India has been experiencing sporadic occurrences, or rather, let me simplify it, random occurrences of rainfall distribution, where certain areas they experience sudden high incidence of rainfall, whereas certain areas they are devoid of rainfall for a longer period of time, so they experience very dry conditions. Now, an area which is experiencing dry conditions, it needs some amount of finance to cater to that, right? The area which is experiencing flood, that needs some money in order to cater to the requirements of that. For example, take the case of our neighborhood, Pakistan. Now, regardless of whatever you might feel about the neighbor, but one thing you have to understand, that Pakistan recently suffered from one of the most devastating floods to have hit the subcontinent, one of the most. As a result of that, one third of the country was drowned, right? And still, many people in many areas, still, you still have water which is logged. That meant a loss of billions of dollars worth of revenue systems, of employment generation program. Everything was lost in Pakistan. Now, Pakistan has been running from pillar to post to get some money for it. Money to do what? To rehabilitate the people, to get life back to normalcy. So that is where climate finance is required. So when we talk about this climate finance, it refers to the financial resources that are allocated to address climate change and its impact. It encompasses a wide range of financial instruments and mechanisms that support climate mitigation and adaptation or adoption measures. It is critical for enabling countries in order to withstand the vagaries of nature and the unpredictabilities that come their way due to climate change. Now, there are certain challenges that befall in front of us because climate finance is not available to us. Pakistan is the ideal example. The entire world had been talking about that if there is an issue with regards to climate change, we will come to support you. The Western countries, the so called preachers of climate, the so called prophets of climate, so to say, all these Western countries and Western economies, they decided and they chose to look the other way when Pakistan asked for some help. So that is where you have a significant lack of funds from the West. What the West is expecting rather is that if countries like India, China, etc., they contribute 1 billion, then I will also give 1 billion. But then the Western countries, historically and traditionally, they have been more responsible to bring about the impact of climate change because the countries like India, China, we have started industrializing only since the past 20 years. They are the ones who have been burning fossil fuels for the past 200 years, polluting the environment, creating all these issues that we are talking about. So there is a kind of a responsibility that they also need to pay to the world. And that is where they are lacking. Then, even if there are financial instruments available, for example, GEF or Green Environment Facility, etc., now getting that funding is very difficult because you need to be in good relations with many different countries to get that funding. You need to have good connections as well. Your project needs to fulfill certain criteria as well. So in many of the cases, the entire project is dropped because the financing is not available. Then high cost of financing is also there. Lack of capacity and technical expertise in order to implement a program which can take care of climate change, newer technology, alternative fuel. So there is a lack of technical expertise where in developing nations, in developing nations. And when they experience a lack of technical expertise, that is where they require assistance. For assistance, what is required? Money. And that is something they don't have. And nobody is ready to give to them. Inadequate private sector engagement. So, whatever measures are being observed and followed across the world in order to withstand the impacts and the uncertainties of nature, almost all these programs are government run. Now, government run programs have their own limitations. They have their own set of limitations in terms of what are the newer methodologies that they can deploy, the scale at which they can work upon, because the government doesn't have that much amount of money. It is the private sector which can take the lead, but private sector is not stepping up in any of the countries, major countries rather. Then political and policy barriers are also there. For example, this is more apparent in the case of countries such as United States. Now, the entire world led by United States, that and United States in itself, under the presidency of President Barack Obama, United States was very instrumental in framing the wordings of the Paris Agreement, which the entire world is following as of now. But then, as soon as Donald Trump came in and became the president of United States, the entire aspect was changed. United States pulled out of Paris Agreement. Why? Because Donald Trump did not agree to the principles that were advocated by Barack Obama. And in very simple words, Donald Trump thought that climate change is a kind of a conspiracy, it is not a reality. So these kinds of political barriers, they also create issues in terms of achieving funding and getting funding at the relevant point of time or at the required point of time. Now, what do we do going ahead into the future? How do we secure the financing so that the countries, they don't need to run from pillar to post in order to secure the finance? For that, we need to cultivate the growth of developmental financial institutions, or what are referred to as DFIs. Now, these developmental financial institutions, they are sector specific in general, right? So you can have climate based DFIs who will provide you money for a long term. Yes, they will need to have some amount of contingency mechanism in place, but that can be supported by the various governments. Governments can also pitch in so that the fund availability is easier. Banks will never provide you for such a long period, but these DFIs, they can. Now, then long-term resources will need to be raised from DFIs, developmental financial institutions, as there is a large gap. Sometimes, and in some places, in order to mitigate the risk, the government can also step in. Then, investment from the private sector. That is very essential. After that, blended funding mechanism, that is combination of private and public funds, so that any one of the sector does not feel the entire burden of it. It is shared. Then startups and technology based funding, because please understand, whenever and in whichever area you have that startup culture, there is always that kind of an enthusiasm to come up with newer methodologies which can solve the issue, the newer technologies which can provide a solution to the issue. So that is where the startups and the technology based funding, that can be feasible. Because as we have talked about repeatedly in this session, better technologies that you have, better is the availability of funding that you will get. More people will be interested in your product. So that is where this kind of funding can be exploited. Then innovative retail funding. Retail funding means that you take crowd funding, that you take funding from the general public. For example, let's say that you have issued a kind of a bond for the larger public, that buy these bonds, with the money that we get from these bonds, we will make something which is relevant for the environment. And in the long run, this will give you economic benefit as well. So like that, you can go for innovative mechanisms and innovative funding schemes. Okay, retail funding here refers to funding from common public. Yes, Gokul, something like that. Okay. Lack of access to finance, Anish, is basically about the fact that, see, here when we talk about lack of access to finance, suppose you have one of those, that is DEF, an environmental funding body which is there. Now, in order to get your project passed from GEF, first of all, GEF will never pass a project if you are not in good relation with the Western economies. So, despite the funding, you don't have the access to funding. Then, secondly, your project needs to fulfill certain immediate criteria as prescribed by GEF. Now, again, certain technical nuances can make you ineligible for funding. So, despite the fact that there is funding available, you don't have access to it. So, that is the lack of access to finance. Okay, right? So, the question: elaborate upon the need to secure funding for the future in order to mitigate the expected climate risk. So, in the intro, you discuss about the need to secure. So, need for climate funding. Sairam, what should be the motto of private player to invest? Always profit. Always, regardless of whatever any individual tells you, private entities, they always invest for profit. And even these projects that we are talking about, they will also yield you profit. You can monetize these projects later on. They will give you very heavy profits, right? So that is what you write in the intro. And then in the body, basically, the need for secure funding in the future. So some part of it, some part of the need, you can elaborate in the body as well. Then measures which can be initiated. So here you can talk about the challenges faced for funding, challenges faced in order to secure funding. Then after that, way forward, and then in conclusion, why it is essential to secure funding now, right? Give the example of countries such as Bangladesh, give the example of countries such as Pakistan, how they have suffered incrementally and tremendously. So that is why we need to secure this funding as early as possible. GEF is Global Environment Facility. Okay. Then we come to the last topic of the day, that is plastic consumption, bending the curve. Curve of what? How we are consuming the plastic. So this is again based upon a report which has been generated. So basically the report is, this is the report, that is peak plastics, bending the consumption curve. And that is an economist impact report for Back to Blue, an initiative for economist impact and the Nippon Foundation. So this particular portion is something which is going to be relevant for your prelims preparation. All those who are appearing for prelims this year and even next year. Now, what kind of question can be asked from here? For example, you can always have a question that a statement that United Nations Environment Program has generated a report, peak plastics, etc., bending the consumption curve. You have to find out whether it is correct or incorrect. Now, whenever in front of these reports you find the names such as the heavy names such as UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, and so on, immediately you think it is correct. So that is where the Economist, I hope the magazine you are aware of, it is a very good magazine, but I won't suggest that you read it on a monthly basis. So basically, few of the articles here and there you can pick up. So it is based upon that report. The report suggests that plastic consumption in G20 countries will almost double by 2050. Only in G20, if we consider, it will double by 2050, and the volume of plastic consumption, that will rise to 451 million tons, almost doubling from 261 million tons, what was there in 2019. Now, it basically explores the potential impact of policies considered by the various different treaty negotiations. So, here is basically the global plastic outlook overall. If you will observe, then basically here you observe that how the trend has been increasing. This is the global plastic usage, global plastic exploitation overall, if you can term it like that. So here you will observe that the entire world is using around 460 metric tons and has used 460 metric tons in 2019, something that only the G20 countries, they can themselves use that one if they are not stopped. So this is the forecast for G20 countries. Observe that the G20 countries right now, they are around 261 metric tons or million tons of plastic usage. This can increase to around 451. So that can almost double. So we need to bend the consumption curve. We need to reduce the consumption of the plastic. Now, when we talk about plastic, so please understand, plastic has a journey of its own. So plastic, when we talk about it, there is production. Bending the curve basically means that this curve that you see, the usage curve, that needs to be bent so that the usage reduces. That is the meaning of bending the curve. Then, utility. And you also have disposal of plastic. Okay? This is basically the entire journey of plastic. So, in a way, if you have to prevent the usage of plastic, you will inhibit the production, you will reduce the production of plastic. Then the utility aspect of it, that is also something you will reduce. How? By banning single-use plastic products like India has done, like many other countries have done. So you restrict the usage of single-use plastics. Then disposal. So you have the extended producer responsibility, where the producer, in a way, is responsible for the plastic waste generated, for taking care of that. So if you bring forward the policy measures where simultaneously you are reducing the production, simultaneously you are restricting the use, and then you are ensuring that the producer is only taking care of all the plastic which has disposed of, then when there is a conjunction, a synergy of all these policy measures, only then will we see a fruitful result emerging out of it. If each one of them, they keep on acting individually and separately, there is no result or no benefit which is accrued, as we have seen. So the report examines the potential impact of three policies, the three key policies that cover the entire life cycle of the plastic from production to disposal. How? So, a ban on problematic single use plastic, the utility aspect. A polluter pays extended producer responsibility, where whosoever has produced that plastic, that person will be responsible how that plastic is disposed, where that plastic is thrown off. So, extended producer responsibility scheme for full end of life cost, and a tax on virgin plastic production. So, production, this is taking care of production. This is taking care of utility. And this is the one taking care of disposal of plastic. Now, despite all of these efforts, but all of these efforts, they are working and implemented in isolation. So, despite all these efforts, the world is not seeing a benefit out of it. We need to be seeing the benefit. How? Put all of them together, right? So when you try to implement them together, only then will we have a desirable change which shall be experienced. So the report warned that extended producer responsibility schemes will have a minimal effect on the consumption of single-use plastic products, because majority of the single-use plastics that are being banned now, majority of these, they are basically disposed of directly on the streets or in the landfills. The producer of the plastic nowhere even comes into the picture. They are not even concerned that what that plastic is doing right now. So that is where, just if you carry out that, okay, we will ensure extended producer responsibility, that whosoever has produced, they will cater to it. Nobody will cater to it in that way. So you need to reduce the production as well. You need to be more stringent with how the plastic is used as well. But plastic has been around for a very long time, some time now. And that is where there are very limited kind of replacements or alternatives which are present for plastics. Because the plastics, they are not only resistant to heat, water, etc., moisture, etc., they don't react easily. They are very lightweight as well. So from automotive sectors to aircraft industry, everywhere plastic is used. So suddenly eliminating it out, will that work? No. We will have to choose the plastics which are more dangerous. We have to eliminate them first. We have to develop alternatives, alternate technologies which can bring about changes in the production and the utility pattern. Now, plastics generally, many of the times, they get broken down into small parts and they are consumed by individuals, and then they pass on into the food chain via the method of accumulating in a body over a period of time. If I start keep on consuming the same animal or the same source where plastic is there, then overall it will accumulate in my body, or through the food chain it can magnify and reach my body. In many of the marine species and marine animals, they meet a kind of a premature death because the plastic beads, they get stuck in their vital organs. So marine life is also significantly impacted. But then impact on human health is, after all, what we are concerned with. Anything in the world which does not deal with humans directly, we don't even pay attention to that. So human health. Now, not only does plastic enter our food chain by the various mechanisms that we have talked about, but also the utility of the plastics in the sense of the clothing apparels, synthetic clothes that are made. In many of the cases, the plastic in small sizes that interacts with the skin and is absorbed by the skin. So imagine if you wear a kind of a cloth for a very long period, many years together, automatically the plastic concentration in your body, that is set to increase. So that can never be beneficial in the long run, can it? So that is where we need to curb the usage. Now, what is the way forward? The way forward, identifying hotspots of usage. Hotspots of usage. What kind of plastic products are being used with greatest frequency and where they are being used. Then, accordingly, we can control those areas. Control those areas of production, of utilization, and so on. Breaking down plastic waste and ensuring that it is reused, retreated, recycled, rather than being left in the nature on its own. Development of a circular economy, for example, the plastic that is there, the plastic waste that is there, we can use it for, as is being used in many of the road sectors and road alignments in country. They can be used for manufacturing of roads, in certain cases manufacturing of apparels, in a safe manner if it is done. So it can develop job opportunities, employment opportunities, and economic benefit will automatically be guaranteed by that. Then unified action across all fronts. That is a unification of the policy measures. So unification of policy measures is absolutely needed in order to bring about a control and a curb in the utility, production, and consumption of plastics. So, despite the legislative measures in place, consumption of plastics is on the rise. what can be the approach to be followed in order to curb the usage of plastics. So in this, when we talk about the introduction, in the introduction, you will have to talk about the aspect that, and you have to talk about the trend of increased usage. Okay, that is something you highlight, and this can be around 20-25 words. If you are writing it in that, more than enough. Body, then why policies are failing. Okay, then after, what can be done. Then after, if suppose you have scope, you also write about the plastic waste management rules 2022 passed by the government. So you can talk about government's measure where government has banned single use plastic and also has brought in various different curbs, right? The Plastic Management Act, etc. You can highlight. Then conclusion, you can write about how it is important in order to maintain sanctity and better living standards for us humans and also for protection of biodiversity. We need to curb the usage of plastics, we need to lessen the usage of plastics, and that is how you conclude the answer. So that is where we'll restrict the session for today. I hope that this session has added some value to your already set of existing information set. Now, till we meet again, that will be all from my side. Now, a few questions I will take, and then we will end the session. Okay. Now, production of H2O on consumption of H2 in vapor, but it leads to global warming. Yes, but it is a very short term global warming. So the H2O that you see in the atmosphere, and this is a question by Vipin. So Vipin, the H2O that you see in the atmosphere, that does not stay in a place for a very long time because vapor in itself is very dynamic. So that is where, yes, sometimes that H2O which is produced, that will lead to water vapor being added to the atmosphere. But nonetheless, even when we sweat, that also, or there's perspiration, that also adds water vapor to the atmosphere. So do we stop that as well? It is still much better than adding benzene, toluene, nitrous oxide, sulfur dioxide, etc. to the atmosphere. It's still a cleaner option as compared to that. Kennedy, the types of hydrogen basically you will study in science and tech, my dear friend. But think about it. When we talk about black hydrogen, that is when hydrogen is produced by burning of coal, right, or methane. So that produces a lot of other gases as well, pollutant gases as well. So the hydrogen produced by that method, that is why it is black. Gray hydrogen, that is where with the help of the coal gas or the syngas you are able to produce hydrogen, right? That is gray hydrogen. Now the outcome of the gray hydrogen, the other effluents of the gray hydrogen, if you are able to, or if you manage to sequester that, return it to the ground, that is blue hydrogen then. And when you produce by renewables, that is green hydrogen. Okay. uh, Development of circular economy, Devansh, is basically where you have job opportunities, economic opportunities which present themselves even in the reutilization and recycling of any product. Okay. Ice sheet, these are large. See, the region around the poles, they have very large areas under thick ice sheets. Ice sheets in many of the areas, they extend for many hundred meters. Now, with increased heating, that ice sheet is getting thinner and thinner. So obviously, its ability to reflect sunlight, that is also reducing. That is what is meant by loss of ice sheet, Rajkumar. And thank you for being patient, Rajkumar. Vimal, also, you have been asking the same question for a long time, but you were patient enough. Good. Technology based funding, Devansh, basically refers to that if you have the modern adequate technology, to counter any particular impact, then automatically you will get funding. So develop newer technology, then get funding, rather than sitting on the same technology and implementing 50-year-old technology to combat climate change. Develop a newer one. Obviously, you will attract funding across the globe. See, ice sheets, Shiva, they don't move, but the glaciers, they end up moving. The glaciers, they are moving chunks of ice. So that is the biggest difference. Okay. High cost of funding is the cost of borrowing that is present. That cost, the interest that you have to repay, that is very high, sort of. DFIs, they basically have the funds for any dedicated purpose. It can be, for example, for housing, for manufacturing, for small scale industries. So they will provide you funding only for that sector, right? That is what is a DFI. ICICI Bank, before it became a bank, it was a DFI, right? Okay. Usage in roads basically is where you use the plastic materials, you melt it with bitumen, and then you reapply it on the roads. Yes, Jogendra, that is true. GEF is Global Environment Facility. Okay. One of the method, Saurabh, that is the most dominant method. See, otherwise sea level is going to rise because the planet is going through a warming phase. Now, if you have to prevent that warming phase, you have to bring about some amount of cooling as well. It is no longer sufficient to restrict the temperature rise. That is why. Okay. So that is where I'll take your leave. That is where I'll restrict the session for today. Again, I hope that it has been meaningful for you. Something positive has been extracted out of it. Try to write the answers, get them evaluated, and that is how you will improve over a period of time. So, for rest of you, all the best. Do take care of yourself. Goodbye, good night, and thank you.